Hi, this is chapter 13 of the book Hold On to Your Kids by Gordon Neufeld. This chapter is called Unteachable Students. So it's a great chapter for teachers, but also for parents because your kids are going to be going to school or are in school already. So Gordon Neufeld starts out by talking about two different students who are smart and used to do well in school, but as they became more peer oriented, they became argumentative with their parents and teachers, lost interest in school, and stopped asking intelligent questions, didn't want to do their homework anymore, and spent all time in class talking to their friends. So, due to this whole phenomena of intelligent children being unmotivated to learn, teaching has become much more difficult and stressful. Classrooms are increasingly unmanageable and academic performance seems to have slipped. Reading abilities have declined despite the heavy emphasis on literacy. Our teachers have never been better trained than today. Our curriculum has never been better developed, and our technology has never been more sophisticated. So, what's changed? Many parents and teachers believe you should be able to put a capable student together with a good teacher to get good results. That would make sense, you would think. Knowledge, Goethe said, can't be put into a mind like coins in a bag. So apparently, it's not that simple. The teachability of a student is the outcome of many different factors. So think about yourself as a student of this book club and what kind of abilities you have that are on that list and how that benefits you. So the first one is a desire to learn and understand. You probably have that. An interest in the unknown. So being interested in something we don't know yet. So that's the reason you want to learn something. A willingness to take some risks. So if you're just listening to me from at home, it's not as risky. But if you're actually joining the book club on Zoom, or if you were to join a classroom, it feels a little bit more risky because there are other people there who might judge you, right? And you might not always everything you say might not be right. So somebody might correct you, and that can feel really vulnerable. So you need to have a little bit of a willingness to take a risk if you're going to learn something in amongst other people. An openness to being influenced and corrected. So yeah, again, so somebody you might be wrong sometimes, and you to learn then from your mistake, you have to have an openness to be corrected. Um, it also requires a connection with the teacher, or that sure helps if you can trust your teacher and you feel connection with the teacher. Um, an inclination to pay attention, which is hard to do actually over a long period of time, but at least the desire needs to be there to learn. A willingness to ask for help because maybe sometimes you do drift off and you didn't hear something or you didn't understand something, so you got to ask for help and ask for it to be explained to you again. An aspiration to measure up and achieve. So if you didn't feel like achieving anything, you maybe don't feel like learning anything either then. So there's got to be a drive to want to measure up to some sort of goals that maybe somebody else sets or you set. Um, and not being opposed to work because with any learning, some work is required. And if you're super opposed to that, you'll have a harder time learning. But if you're open to that, you're able to learn a lot. So these all of these factors are rooted in or affected by attachment. So um, so having a good attachment always helps for sure. Uh, so then there are four essential qualities that are primary in determining a child's teachability. So the most important ones are a natural curiosity. That's kind of a foundation for all learning, isn't it? An integrative mind, and there's going to be a lot more about what an integrated mind means. An ability to benefit from correction, like we already talked about a little bit, and a relationship with the teacher. So, a healthy attachment enhances all of these, and peer orientation undermines them. Ideally, what should lead a mind into learning is an open minded curiosity about the world. The child should ask questions before coming up with answers, explore and experiment before reaching conclusions. Kind of like being a little bit of a scientist, wanting to know how something works, asking the questions, making some experiments to find out how things work. Curiosity is not a necessary part of a child's personality, but rather part of the emergence of becoming your own person. So it's not really a personality trait as much as it is just you wanting to become your own person, to learn about things, to separate yourself. So that's why toddlers ask a lot of why questions, which can be really annoying, but it's so important, and it's such a good sign that they're in that emergent phase, in that phase where they want to become their own person, where they want to learn things, and it's a prime time for learning. So as much as you can, embrace it and give them answers. That's how they learn. So teachers who value curiosity invite questions and serve as mentors, fueling the child's interests, igniting their passions. You're also a teacher when your child is young, and even when they're older, you're their first and primary teacher. So this is not just for teachers, it's just as much for parents, because make sure you're also the kind of teacher who values curiosity and doesn't snuff it out because it can be overwhelming. And supply them with the questions and ask them stuff, get them thinking. So if emergent learners don't always do well in school, it's probably because having their own ideas of what they want to learn, they experience the curriculum imposed by the teacher as an unwelcome intrusion. So when they're still little and at home and you're their primary teacher, or even after school and their spare time with older kids, when they have an interest, like they can learn a lot through exploring that interest. You always learn more if you're interested in something. So you can learn how to read and write through dinosaurs, for instance. To relate to dinosaurs, you can read dinosaur books, right? Then the reading will be more fun. So use their interests to foster learning. Curiosity is a luxury, developmentally speaking. Attachment is what matters most. We can only explore the unknown when our attachment needs are taken care of. So we won't even have time for curiosity. We won't feel settled enough to think about other things if we're unsettled in our attachment needs. If you don't know if you're loved and taken care of, that's the most important thing. Then you can't think about how the universe works or why things fall down when you drop them. That's like the next level. So people who are completely preoccupied with attachment, instead of being interested in the unknown, they're bored of anything that doesn't serve the purpose of attachment. Boredom is epidemic among the peer-oriented. So little kids are not bored very often usually. When they get older and they get into that phase where they're like bored and everything is stupid, a lot of kids go through that, and it often is because suddenly only their friends are interesting to them, and other stuff is just like, who cares? So it just means it's time to get them back into attachment with you so that they have the secure base to explore from and learn from. So there's another problem regarding curiosity. It makes a person highly vulnerable in the peer world of cool. So sometimes kids start out being very curious, raise their hands and stuff in school, and then when they get to an age where the other kids call them a nerd, then suddenly it's like, oh, okay, that's not cool anymore, and that really snuffs out curiosity. So for self-motivation, it helps to have an integrative mind, a mind capable of processing contradictory impulses or thoughts. So you might not feel like going to school, but you worry about missing out on things. You might not feel like getting up in the morning, but you worry about being late. You might not feel like doing homework, but you worry about the consequences of getting left behind in your knowledge from your peers. So if you're less mature and you don't have an integrated mind yet, then you just care about the here and now. So if I'm tired right now, I'm going to sleep in and then worry about the consequences later and maybe blame somebody else. So it's a sign of maturation. So for this to happen, a child needs to be attached enough to care what adults, parents, or teachers think. The child must be able to feel deeply and vulnerably. Not being vulnerable, not caring, paralyzes learning and teachability. Yeah, you have to care about stuff to want to learn and to care about what people think for one thing, but also to care about learning even. So students need an integrative intelligence for any learning that's more than just memorizing and regurgitating. Just as depth perception takes two eyes, depth learning requires the ability to see things from at least 2 points of view. So integrative functioning happens as part of maturation. Our curriculum takes the integrative abilities of children for granted, but not all children reach this level of maturity. We end up trying to get them to do something their minds are not capable of and then punish them when they don't succeed. Those with integrative minds assume that everyone has minds that work that way, but not everybody can think that way. Peer-oriented children are more likely to be disabled learners, like learners that have some problems learning, untempered in thought, feeling, and action. And I don't know if you remember from another chapter when he talks about being tempered. Untempered means they can only feel one thing at a time. Being tempered means feeling mixed emotions. So peer orientation jeopardizes adaptive trial and error learning. Most learning occurs by trial and error. Failure is an essential part of the learning process, and correction is the primary instrument of learning. So keep that in mind for yourself too. Like, it's okay to make mistakes. Like, we're supposed to make mistakes. We learn from them. And also keep it in mind for your little kids, that let them know that it's okay, and don't get so mad because we don't generally get mad at them when they make a mistake in math. We just explain it to them. But we often get really mad at them when they make mistakes in social interactions, like when they don't share, for instance. We get really upset about it, but they're still learning that too. And so just keep in mind they're learning. It's okay to make mistakes. It's okay to fail at stuff. Or hitting somebody, for instance. Like, obviously, you don't want them to hit, but it's something they still have to learn. So you got to teach them. So peer-oriented children feel vulnerable. And this causes 3 issues in regards to learning. So trying new things involves taking a risk. So if you feel really vulnerable as a peer-oriented child, trying new things might feel too risky. Like reading out loud, offering an opinion, experimenting with a new idea. Peer-oriented children are defended against vulnerability and won't want to take the risk of being wrong or getting ridiculed. Even for us as adults, it's a little bit scary sometimes, right? Doing something in front of people because you're worried about being judged. So just imagine for a child who's peer-oriented, so they really worry a lot about what their peers think, what that might feel like in a classroom. It's hard to take a chance then. So the other thing is that the ability to benefit from an error is also much harder to do if you're peer oriented and worry about what they think. Before we can learn from our mistakes, we have to recognize, acknowledge them, and assume responsibility for our errors. A lot of adults have a hard time with that too. We need to welcome help, advice, and correction. Peer-oriented children have a hard time admitting their mistakes and tend to blame others. Peer-oriented adults do that, who are immature adults. Pointing out what they did wrong might make them feel like something is wrong with them, and their reaction can be quite hostile. So the third strike against trial and error learning for peer-oriented children is that the futility of a course of action doesn't sink in when a child is too defended against vulnerability. So instead of realizing something isn't working and needs to change, children who are defended against vulnerability, who have a hard time feeling that, will blame the teacher, the boring assignments, the lack of time, or even themselves. I'm so stupid. Instead of turning from frustration to sadness, this didn't work, and then make a change, like maybe changing their work habits. So, yeah, you gotta have a certain amount of vulnerability to realize that, oh, something went wrong, to really realize it. Something went wrong here, I need to make a change. So peer orientation makes students into attachment-based learners, even as it attaches them to the wrong mentors, to the peers rather than the teachers. As long as children are emergent learners, like the learners who ask the why questions and all of that, they can be taught by teachers who allow their interests to take the lead. So even if they're not super attached, they're just, if the teachers kind of teach them with their interest in mind, they can learn a lot. Children who are integrative, like who can have one feeling, like two feelings at a time, I should say, who can think this, and then on the other hand, they can be brought face to face with the conflicting factors that need to be considered when solving a problem. So on the one hand this, on the other hand that, and a lot of learning can happen from that. Adaptive children can be taught through trial and error and correction. Such children are teachable even by people they're not attached to. So when these crucial learning practices are suppressed, learning becomes dependent on one dynamic alone, which is attachment. Attachment is by far the most powerful process in learning. There have always been students who lacked adaptive, emergent, and integrative function because they're just not at that level of maturity yet. Although they won't reach their full potential without those, they can often perform well. Attachment-based learners are highly motivated in ways other students might not be. They are more predisposed to learn via imitation, modeling, memorizing, and cue taking. They want to measure up, and they will work for approval, recognition, and status. It's not a problem to be an attachment-based learner as long as the student is attached to the adults rather than the peers. Being peer-oriented doesn't make children into attachment-based learners, but if a child is an attachment-based learner, peer orientation makes it very hard for them to learn from their teachers because they don't really even care what their teachers think. They care what their peers think. And for the peers often don't think it's cool to do really well in school. Some kids pretend to be dumber and get worse grades on purpose just to fit in with their peers because, when in the younger grades, it's often still you're considered smart if you do well. When you get older, suddenly kids make you feel like something's wrong with you, like you're a nerd and weird if you're doing really well. So then sometimes kids feel like, oh, I want them to like me. So they get worse grades on purpose, which is so sad, just to fit in. For peer-oriented children, academic subjects become irrelevant. How is chemistry or math related to being with my friends? Like, if all you care about your friends, then those other subjects seem meaningless. It's captured in the song Wonderful World. Don't know much about history. Don't know much about biology, but I do know that I love you. It really captures that feeling like the subjects don't matter. All this guy cares about is the love for this girl, which, totally happens. And sometimes it's all about your friends, too. So formal education isn't generally valued by the young. It takes some maturity to realize that education can open minds and doors, that it can humanize and civilize. What students need is to value those who value education. So if they value their teachers or their parents who value education, then they'll fall in line and do it, even if it doesn't really make that much sense to them yet. But later on in life, they'll be really grateful that they got the education that they needed. So they can, at least follow our cues until they're old enough to make decisions for themselves. So peer orientation robs students of their teachers. When children attach to a teacher, their teacher has the natural power to script the child's behavior, to solicit good intentions, and to instill social values. Children learn best when they like their teacher and they think their teacher likes them. So that's really important if you are a teacher to form that bond, and I know it's hard to like everybody in the same way, but to find something you like about them and make them more endearing to you. And for you as a parent too, if you have a good relationship and you make learning fun and all of that, it'll make it so much easier for them to learn. If you're screaming stuff at them, their brain just shuts down and it's not going in there. So the way to children's minds has always been through their hearts. I don't think it's much different for adults, to tell you the truth, either. You also have to feel at least respected to be able to learn well, or to at least make learning more fun. When a child is peer-oriented, learning peaks during recess, so they don't learn as much in the classroom because they just care about their peers. But at recess time and all the time when they spend socializing, that's when learning takes place. But it's of course not academic learning. It's learning about how to interact. Some of that is useful, but also some of it is totally not useful, like copying other kids that you wish they would not be copying. So sometimes people think new curriculum that is less authoritarian is at fault for the chaos and lack of learning in schools compared to the more authoritarian style in the past. Teachers in authoritarian educational systems have not yet realized that it was connection, not coercion, that facilitated learning. So in the past, generally, children were more adult oriented with their parents and their teachers. They took their cues from adults. Now lots of times children take their cues from other children and then they don't learn as much. So it's not that, it was strict and they got hit or something that made the learning better. It was the attachment. So instead of dealing with the problem of peer orientation, we often make it worse, unfortunately. The idea of children learn best from each other is teaching children how to talk like their peers, walk like their peers, dress like their peers. They learn how to conform and imitate in order to fit in. So as a teacher and as a parent, you still have to be in charge. You've got to be in the lead. Don't expect the kids. Like sometimes even, people think babies are going to learn from each other by beating each other up or whatever. Yeah, you learn something from that, but they don't know what they're doing yet. So you've got to help them out, so that they don't think the world is just like a place of if you're bigger, if you're stronger, you're mightier. You want some real learning to go on. You got to be in charge, and the teacher has to be in charge. Teachers can lead only if students will follow, and students will follow only those that they're attached to. To encounter chronic resistance is a sure recipe for burning out. Teaching harder is not the answer. What fulfills a teacher is to open a student's mind. And to open a student's mind, we first need to win their hearts. So working on the relationship is key. Sometimes we think of teaching as the exclusive duty of teachers. We need to see the education of our young as a social responsibility shared equally by parents, teachers, and all adults who come into contact with our young, as well as those who shape the nature of our society and culture in which children develop and learn about life. Yeah, so everybody does their part. It's not all up to the teacher, it's not all up to the parent. There are other people in society, and we gotta work together, and we've gotta take the lead, and we've gotta do it by having a good attachment and, winning their hearts. So I feel like it's such a positive message. Let's do this together. Thanks for listening.